felt like, why? Why is it that people don't speak out about this? And the reason is because of the stigma related to the word cannabis and what the cannabis user is thought to be like. And in 2010, my mom saw a TV program while I was working in the state of Washington at the Hanford site, working as a medical review officer, family doc, and occupational medicine physician, that it was being used.
Hey guys, it's Mandi with Global Hemp Association. I wanted to say thank you so much for joining. I'm excited about the opportunity to build a relationship and connect this supply chain. I mean, after all, that's why we started the association. Our association was built on the foundation of connecting supply chain, building relationships, and helping you grow your business. Anyone from farmers, manufacturers, and distributors, people that are passionate about the supply chain, and those creating products selling into biofuels, plastics, textiles, construction, and building materials. Already know that we're on too, so we'll see. Well, and we're live. So hello, everybody. Welcome. It always takes a couple of minutes for people to get logged on, but hello for those that are already logged on. Please drop in and say hello. Let us know that you're here and where you're from. Just a quick reminder, you can find other videos, full videos and content on Patreon. And for less than a cup of coffee a month, you can support us getting content out, as well as our membership through globalhempassociation.org. So I'm really excited to introduce our guest today, Dr. Uma. I'm super excited because, well, for lots of reasons, but now we've had an opportunity to hang out a couple of times and actually meet and get to know you. And so I'm even more excited about the work that you're doing and to support you. And so with that, tell us a little bit about who you are and what are all these numbers or letters behind your name? Tell me about your education and your experiences, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Mandi. And truly, it's been a pleasure to get to know you and meet you in person and be a part of this journey. We've been at 2 events together. We were at the Lake of the Ozarks when we did our interview with Ethan, and that was a very heart-touching interview, and all the patients that we got to meet, and also
incredible.
And dance a little bit down there. And then the second phase of it was a lot of fun. And then we got to go to the Southern Hemp Expo, where I was a keynote, and the lecture was Cannabis, the Global Solution. And pretty much my background is I'm originally from India. I came to this country in 1970, and my parents came here for one purpose, which was education. My mom was the first woman in South India to get her master's in statistics in 1959. My dad's a chemical engineer. He was actually involved with the creation of chloroquine, which we're now getting to understand, which was used for malaria back in the 1960s in India and first created there. And I am a doctor. I'm a family doctor, and I truly love what I do. I have a background in where I was a lab rat as well. I did research from tissue culture to animal research to human research. I was involved with drug trials. I was involved with many medications that have come out to the market used for different things. And I've also had a background where I have my master's in public health, which I did at Harvard. And I have 2 specialties that I've done, family medicine. And then I did my second life in a specialty in occupation and environmental medicine, which required me to get my master's in public health. And I went to medical school in Newark, New Jersey. And then I did my residency in family medicine in Charleston, South Carolina. And then I spent 5 years at Harvard from 1998 to 2003. I'm a professional student. I got very fascinated with heavy metals, actually in South Carolina. And then I did a fellowship in heavy metals at Harvard and did my research study with lead. And so I'm also a medical review officer. That's what the MRO means. And that stands for drug testing. So I've been involved as an occupational environmental medicine physician where do no harm is what doctors are told. But I truly believe safety first, do no harm is how I look at things. And as a medical review officer, it was about drug testing. So I came from a world where we tested people for this chemical known as THC, which is federally still illegal, and they lost their jobs, to now where I really want people to reconsider drug testing. And I want them to understand that testing of THC, what that means, because people can be positive for THC even though that they're not impaired. So impairment and drug testing are two different things. So I get involved with speaking about that. And the most important thing that I'm very proud of is to say that I'm a diplomat and certified as a cannabinoid medicine specialist through the American Academy of Cannabinoid Medicine. And I was certified in 2014 after I had seen 2,000 patients and sat for an exam and was certified. I have been writing recommendations for, I like to say cannabis rather than marijuana, because again, there's a lot of connotation to that.
Yes.
And cannabis is the proper term for it. And so that's what we should call it. But I've been writing recommendations since 2012 in the state of Washington first. And I've been in Massachusetts since 2014. And I'm licensed for Massachusetts, Maine, Connecticut, and I also write recommendations for New Hampshire and Vermont. I'm also licensed in the state of Georgia for low-level THC, and I'm licensed in the state of Washington as well. So I get to also pass my message on locally and globally, and I call cannabis the exit drug, not the entrance drug. If anything, it's an entrance to a better quality of life, and it's an exit from pharmaceuticals, narcotics, alcohol, nicotine, and the list just goes on.
Yeah, and even those that are not drugs, like pain or discomfort, it exits a lot, anxiety, whatever people are using it for, right? It's definitely not a, yeah. Okay, so I'm super excited, and I'm glad that you just went over this, because I think the value of where your education comes from, and then to move into the cannabis industry and to still know and believe that all of the education and research that you've done is probably what's fueling your fire behind your message, right? Is you've seen the good, bad, and the ugly, and now you have an opportunity. So tell me a little bit about talk to me about your mission, and talk to me about your story that you're sharing, and some of the whys behind it.
I lost my mom in 2012.
Okay.
To a disease known as idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. So it's a fancy term for we don't know what caused your lung disease. So when we think about lung disease, we think about smokers and exposures. And my mom was not a smoker. She had never touched a cigarette in her life. She really had no known exposure. She was not in an occupation where people are exposed to chemicals and toxins and solvents. She was a computer software programmer. So maybe in the buildings that she worked, or other exposures, but no known exposures. She was not a red meat consumer, so we know that there was no toxins that way where we worry about charred meats and other exposures. So none of that was there. And she was never overweight. She exercised. She did all the so-called right things. And when she died of this disease is when my badass attitude actually came out, because 2 years prior to that is when I really started to learn about the endocannabinoid system, and I had kept my mouth shut. So I really felt like, why is it that people don't speak out about this? And the reason is because of the stigma related to the word cannabis and what the cannabis user is thought to be like. And in 2010, my mom saw a TV program while I was working in the state of Washington at the Hanford site, working as a medical review officer, family doc, and occupational medicine physician, that it was being used in Israel for COPD, asthma, lung cancer, and PTSD. Did not compute. What do you mean? You smoke weed and you're going to feel better and it's going to help you with lung disease? Just did not compute. And that's when my curiosity, and I've always been a curious cat from the time I was little, and my research and everything that I've done, I want the science. If I'm not satisfied with the information, it does not compute. I'm a daughter of a scientist and a mathematician, so a process, and it has to add up. And what I found out was that there was a system that I had never learned about with all my education, which is known as the endocannabinoid system. So after my mother died, my mission began that I wanted to change the stigma regarding cannabis and for the world to know about the endocannabinoid system. And I decided to do it through education. And so that's what really fueled my fire. And what we understand is that the science is there and it's evolved. It's nothing that we just found out about and we have to share the news. What we understand is that the endocannabinoid system is involved with every other system that every healthcare provider learns about, every human being knows about because it's in our body. And yet they were not taught. And it's still not being taught. Only about 20%, I think the numbers are up to, that where healthcare providers know about it. So there's a huge opportunity and a solution. And if there's anything I would like to mandate is the education of the endocannabinoid system. Because if we can understand the science and explain it to people, they can understand why cannabis works with this system. And cannabis is not the only plant. There's many, many more that we're learning about. And it's not even plants, it's psilocybin. It could be exercise. It could be MDMA. We don't even know yet because we're not allowed to study this to the full fruition. Many other countries are right now.
There's people outside were doing yard work, so I muted myself. But okay, joke's on me. So what are next steps? What does it look like to get the education into the schools, and what are you specifically focused on, I guess, for next steps?
My focus is, I call it the 5 Ps.
Okay.
I say that this plant, Dr. Uma says, this plant is for people. It's for pets. It's for the planet. It's for peace and profit. And that profit is not just jobs, but your health and wellness. You only got one body and one life. And I want everybody to become an educated consumer and a customer. You cannot leave healthcare to just the healthcare providers anymore. You're responsible. You need to know what you're putting in your body, around you, on you, what you use. It's about you. And my philosophy is that if we can legalize cannabis, I have 5 pillars that I'm working on also. I like 3s and 5s.
Yes.
So my 5 pillars are, I want to see legalization throughout the world. I want to see people create cultivation. We should all be able to grow this plant everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
We need laboratory standards so we can understand what we're looking at. That's very, very important. Testing for heavy metals, solvent residuals. What's the profile of the cultivar? We need product development.
Mm-hmm.
And the most important thing is education. Education about the endocannabinoid system, and that the fact that we are all stigmatized because of the history and the rhetoric and the change of the name from marijuana
Mm-hmm.
is how it's listed, but it's truly cannabis. And it went from cannabis to marijuana, and that's why I want to use the proper word, cannabis.
Okay, so can you drop some knowledge about the endocannabinoid system? What are people really missing? I want to dive in, and I love the techie talk. Lay it on us.
All right. So what we understand is that this system has evolved from a sea squirt to what we have in humans today. It's 600 million years old. What we've understood is that there's phytocannabinoids that come from plants. There's synthetic cannabinoids that are developed in a lab, like Marinol, Epidiolex, and some others ones that are still out there that are prescribed by doctors. And then there's endocannabinoids that are made in our own body. The first endocannabinoid we identified was called anandamide. Dr. Meshulam, who first started working with this plant and identified and synthesized THC in 1964 in Israel. Like I said, the story began of my mother watching a TV program about how it was used in Israel. Dr. Meshulam, years later, was the one who identified anandamide as the molecule produced within our own body. The first drop of breast milk a baby receives has this molecule in it. Anandamide mimics THC, and THC is what works with these receptors. In 1988, the year my son was born, is when we identified CB1. A few years later, we identified CB2. What we identified is there's multiple receptors throughout the whole body. We've mentioned THC, there's CBD, and there's about 200 different identified cannabinoids to date. And we've identified that THC works with CB1 receptors, which are primarily in the brain, CB2 receptors, which are primarily in the immune system. But THC is what works with CB1 and CB2 receptors. CBD, on the other hand, works in a different mechanism and with different receptors. And this is why we want the whole plant. I want people to understand what's happening in science is we're separating, we're isolating, and we're synthesizing. And what happens is we get one molecule at a time. But this plant is made up of cannabinoids. The most intoxicating is THC. The most intoxicating is CBD. So there's a range. We have flavonoids that are part of the color of the plant. Terpenoids, which give it the aroma, the terpenes. And we talk about limonene and pinene. And these are things people can smell. Peppers, lavender, your citrus, all of these are terpenes. And that's what this plant possesses. So it has so many different components, this plant. And what we're understanding is how it works with this body system. So there's 3 facts that we want people to understand. Number 1, nobody, a big fat 0, nobody in the whole world has ever overdosed from cannabis. The reason is the brainstem is void of these receptors where it controls our heart rate and our breathing. And people die from cardiac arrest or respiratory depression. And you may feel like you're dying if you take too much of cannabis, but you're not going to die. That's pretty good to know that, right? Safety first, do no harm is what Dr. Uma says.
Especially considering how many prescribed drugs or how many prescriptions on the label say may cause death.
Absolutely. And that's one thing we could say. And I could actually say may cause some happiness.
Yeah.
Anxiety and paranoia. And that does happen with our patients that are not educated on how to use it. But the endocannabinoid system is why we are able to use this one plant in different delivery mechanisms based on the individual and the products that we can use and how it can help. Because the endocannabinoid system's function is for homeostasis, balance, flow is what I call it. And the flow must happen throughout all systems, from our nervous system to our respiratory system, our cardiac system, our reproductive system, our GI system, and every other system in the body. And what we found is that This plant, fact number 2, was prescribed by doctors, and it was in the United States Pharmacopoeia from 1850 to 1942. So most doctors don't even know that. And there was different companies. My dad worked for Park Davis, Eli Lilly, Squibb, all made these medications that had cannabis in it, tinctures that were used. And the difficult thing was getting the alcohol for the tinctures because prohibition was going on. The other fact, the third fact that I want people to know is that the government has a patent. And we celebrated the anniversary on October 7th, 2003, the United States patent for cannabinoids as an antioxidant and neuroprotectant. The fact, they've known about it for treatment, prevention, and maintenance of Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia, strokes, and cardiac victims. So those are the 3 facts. And the endocannabinoid system works uniquely in that when we talk about dopamine and serotonin, they're made in the presynaptic, released, and they bind to the postsynaptic. Endocannabinoids are made in the postsynaptic, they're released, and they bind to the pre. So it's a unique retrograde mechanism, and it's constantly trying to put you at ease. And when we are not at ease, we are at dis-ease. And we come up with fancy names for that. Dermatitis, arthritis, bursitis, carditis, appendix. It's some itis, which means inflammation. So the endocannabinoid system, in the words of Dr. Damaso, is meant for us to relax, eat, sleep, forget, and protect. And Dr. Uma explains it in one word: life.
Really? I mean, okay. So it makes me so excited hearing this because it's something I struggle with when I communicate, because this education barrier, right? And just like you said, the word cannabis is scary. I can say hemp and it's a little bit easier to talk about. But if I slip and call hemp cannabis, which it is, right? People immediately are like, oh yeah, no, I'm off. I'm done, right? So when I'm speaking to an older population, what is the benefit really? Like, why should they, and I bring this up because I heard you in a presentation say every older person or everybody that's passing away should have the right to use cannabis or should have access to cannabis. Help me understand why. What is it for them that's really why is that statement so impactful?
Oh, you're touching my heart now, because this is the reality, folks. Wake up. We're all going to die one day. It's just a matter of time. Okay. So my philosophy is whip to rip. Dr. Uma says whip to rip, which means we're all a work in progress. And at the end of the day, we're all going to rest in peace.
Yes.
Right? So it's an event. Nobody's getting out alive. So the bottom line is, how would I want to be treated? How would I want my loved ones? And how would I want to educate my patients to say, you must and should have the rights to die with dignity? And it's not only the person that's dying, folks. It's the people that are left behind when you watch. And the sad part is when a parent has to lose a child. There's nothing that's right about that. And so I want people to understand that there's an option, a choice, an alternative. The research is there, and it is truly a solution. That's why I say cannabis cares. It's a choice. It's an alternative. Research, education, and solutions. That's what I'm looking at it as. And that's how I present it to people, to say, I want you to also remember, cannabis is all of it. If it's less than 0.3% THC, it's classified as hemp. If it's greater than 0.3% THC, it's classified as marijuana. So guess what? It's all cannabis. So why don't we just call it that? But the reason of the hemp is because it's, again, political.
Yeah.
Because it gives hemp the ability to go nationwide and be able to be transported. And this is where CBD comes into play, because CBD can be extracted from 3 ways. It can be hemp derived, which means it's less than 0.3% THC. It can be marijuana derived, which has got greater than 0.3% THC, or it could be synthetic made in a lab, which will say 0% THC. So looking at your labels and understanding that these are the 3 things that you're looking for, these are just guidelines. And for our seniors, there's 3 categories of people that I see. People that are naive, never ever used cannabis. People that are self-medicating is the word I like to use, not recreational. And the third are people sort of in my age group that used it when they were in high school or college, and then family, and now they're reintroduced to it. So the seniors are sometimes reluctant to say, well, I don't want to smoke it. And so I will tell them, let's start with some topicals. Because guess what? This lovely thing called our skin is the largest organ system. 16% of our body weight. I just gave a lecture for the dermatology group to explain that there's receptors on this lovely thing called skin, and the skin is a story. So it's also a delivery mechanism. We absorb things through the skin, toxic and otherwise. So what we tell patients is that you can use it topically, you could use it in a form of tinctures, you can inhale it. An inhalation can be where it's combusted, smoking it, or vaporizing it. In vaporization, there's all different forms of it. There's also suppositories, and I go there. I say, if you got an orifice, I'm going to use it.
You must be a doctor.
Yes, absolutely. We got to bring it. We got to take it to, take out the nervousness or the shame behind how you want to talk about it, but it's real, And there's also now inhalers that are coming out. There's a variety of different mechanisms that it can be used. So try to find one that you like, and then be open to trying some of the other methods, because it's short acting or long acting, quick onset or later onset. So depending on what you need, you can try it. When it comes to death and dying, I feel, compared to all the medications, and I've been there, to let people use, all these morphines and Dilaudid, and they're just drooling or just not there. Why not bring at least a little joy for the people left behind that can be there, and for the person that's dying to die with dignity?
Absolutely. Okay, so what have been some of the biggest obstacles, and not even obstacles, I want to talk about the solutions. What has worked the best for you in overcoming those obstacles as you're presenting cannabis as a solution to somebody who still believes the reefer madness, who still believes that it's the entry drug?
Look it up.
Okay.
I'm not stopping. As long as I can breathe, I will be talking. Okay. And that's where I'm at right now in my life, because nothing's going to bring my mother back.
Yeah.
Yet I'm proud today to say that we're helping people. And I ask people, please, please open your hearts. You don't need to use this medicine, but you know somebody that can benefit from it. Open your minds, because I've just told you, we have an endocannabinoid system. All of us, animals too, any mammalian, and that's why it can work for that. This will open doors for better communication, better relationships. Doctors can't talk about this now because they don't have the information, or they're told to keep their mouth shut. And I'm sorry, it's called medical marijuana. So, hello, medical people. People, everybody, listen to me loud and clear. This is your life, your body, and you only got one.
I love it. I agree. And I think the big thing too is we, the two of us, are not the only two up here saying this, right? This is not going away. It's not new. It's very much like you said in the very beginning. There is research and there is data available, right? So
thousands, not just small. And my thing is that we get drugs to the market. We get vaccines to the market. Why have we not?
Yes. Well, and this is hard for me too. I had an interview a while back. A young lady I went to high school with, actually, who's in the cannabis industry, and she was in pharmacy and as a pharmaceutical rep. She said it was disturbing to know she could carry around a bag of drugs in the back of her truck that would kill people if they got their hands on them, but she can't drop off samples of cannabis.
Yeah,
like that. It puts into perspective where the pharmaceutical industry is and what is allowed compared to what we're battling, right?
This brings up a whole thing on a conversation that's kind of close and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
Here we are, state by state, trying to legalize for medical and adult use. And if we're trying to get a delivery license, you have to have 2 drivers that have cameras on them. Meanwhile, you could get your alcohol dropped at your door. You could get your drugs delivered to your door and mailed to you, and that's okay. And you could carry your oxycodones all over the world and nobody's going to stop you. But my patients cannot carry their cannabis with them and use it when they need it. Mm-hmm. And it's interfered in child welfare cases. It's interfering in divorce cases. It's interfering in workers being able to work properly. And the list just goes on and on and on. And, by the grace of God, I can talk about all of these topics because I do have that foundation and I do have the education and I do have the experience.
And I'd say that's a lot of the solution, right? Is in the beginning of this, there was this big stigma that the only people that were involved in the cannabis industry were these, laid back smokers that don't do anything.
Yeah, the stoners and potheads, call us what you want.
Yeah. But reality is the more that I'm involved in the industry, the number of educated and extremely talented people that I work with is mind-boggling. And what's even more amazing to me is the number of people that are consumers, either daily, recreationally, medically, it doesn't matter, that are very successful and very educated. And so I need to give a shout out to our industry that we are leading the charge when it comes to creativity and innovation and opportunity. And so I thank you because you do have the background that can support the claims and cross over some of this industry or bridge the gap between the cannabis or marijuana hemp industry into the medical profession.
This is where I say food is a drug and cannabis, I call it a drug. And the way I look at it is that cannabis is food and medicine. And that's how I want people to look at it, is even if you don't want to use the marijuana part of it, use the hemp part of it. Start with eating hemp. And I always tell people, hemp, 1 serving, 3 tablespoons gives you 10 grams of protein. That's legal. You can buy it. You can order it. You can go to the grocery store and get it.
At Walmart. It's on the grocery shelves everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yes.
You can get it. And what we want people to understand is start there. And it's yummy. It's really good. It tastes good. And it's got only 180 calories in 1 serving. It gives you 12 grams of omega-3, omega-6. These are very important in inflammation. And like I said, everything is an itis. Everything is about inflammation. And for our seniors, I tell them they are not getting their proper food. And the crappy ass food that they get in these nursing homes and assisted living, it's sickening to me. Their skim milk and slice of bread between bread and processed meat, it's just mind-boggling to me. And that's what we're providing at these places. If they could give them a serving of hemp every day for everybody. Simple things. My youngest in my clinic is 2 right now, and our eldest is 98. And I tell you, I'm blessed every day because I truly love what I do. And I don't know if I could say that about all of my colleagues out there, if they're really happy, because when I came into this, I came into it to be a doctor, and I've left the healthcare system. I don't work for these insurance companies. I don't work for hospitals. I don't work for universities. I work for my patients. I have the liberty to actually spend an hour or more if I need with my patients. My patients have my cell phone number if they need it to call me. And I'm truly get to be a family doctor. And there's something to be said for that today. We're losing a doctor a day to suicide. Unacceptable. We're losing over 90,000 people to opioid epidemics that are prescribed to them legally and that are covered by their insurance companies, which arrive at their mail day in and day out. Polypharmacy. Almost 50% of our population is on at least one medication. Over 25% is on 3 medications, and about 12% is on more than 3 medications. So we have an opportunity, and cannabis to me is a global solution. It can be replacing plastics. I say if we can just start there. We've got climate change that we're talking about, and why I talk about that. We have the opioid epidemic. We don't have food. Our immune systems are not being boosted. We've got COVID. We're going to have other plagues, folks. Get in with the program. Build up your immunity. Boost it up.
Mm-hmm. Well, and
we need to start.
I feel like this has been a good opportunity, right? During the pandemic, there was a big shift, or we saw a big shift in people wanting to pay attention to what they've been told. Is it really what's true, right? Do they know what's actually being told, or is it a story, right? It was eye-opening to me how relevant hemp became during the pandemic, or CBD, or alternative medication, or healthier, right? So much more focus to taking care of ourselves instead of treating ourselves, instead of treating medicine with medicine.
It was twofold, I feel. Some people really took this opportunity to kind of get their act together and reflect and really kind of even clean up their crap in their homes, and a lot of different things had to adjust. And some people, got addicted because alcohol was open and more prescriptions were being prescribed. And I look at it as it was two things.
You're right.
And
you're exactly right. The divide became very, very obvious. You're right.
Yeah. And so I really feel, again, it's an opportunity. And what's really amazing is when I started to write recommendations for cannabis in 2012, I did most of it, in fact, all of it, a majority of it through telehealth. And I was trained in 1998 as a family physician to take call over the phone. We took home calls. So I have a rock solid foundation on how to do telehealth and do all of these things. And that was eye-opening for some doctors because they didn't know how to do some of this stuff over the phone. How do you take a physical? How do you get information from the patient? Different art of medicine. And I really look at this as a huge opportunity. And I tell people all the time, and my colleagues, I say, look, all patients are not healthcare providers. All healthcare providers are patients. So at some point, you're going to need to look at this as an option, either for yourself or for somebody else. So learn about it. And I look at cannabis for two folds only. I classify it as medical and industrial. So I never say that your cardiac system is working medically and recreationally. Your nervous system is working medically and recreationally. So why would I refer to my endocannabinoid system as working medically and recreationally? It's all medical.
Or when we're using industrial hemp to rub on our face because we extracted the CBD out of it. It's
still medicine.
It's not, it's still a medical or a health and wellness product. I'm not rubbing industrial hemp on my face, even though that's where it's classified legally. It's not.
You talk about those. So imagine all those plastic scrubbers that we're using. Mm-hmm. Here's an idea that we could just throw out to the public right now. Innovation can be happening right here, right? If those plastic things were made out of those hemp fibers that you just said, all those scrubbers that we could be using on our body would not be plastic destroying, but be healing my skin.
Mm-hmm. See, so give that a shout out. It's amazing to me, the innovation. Pretty soon we're going to see it because there's
Here's Dr. Uma's scrub.
Yes, yes, we'll patent that. We'll trademark that, Dr. Uma. So talk to me, how can we within the industry really support what you're doing? And then how do other people really get involved to help move this message?
One of the things we're trying to create is the nonprofit arm of what I'm doing so that the work that I'm doing can be supported, because I've been doing it for a decade and I've been a one-woman team, and I'm blessed to the opportunity of all the people that are out there that support what I'm doing. And I've touched people all over the world. Some of them I'm not physically touched, but I'm there with you, and they're giving me the support to be able to speak so boldly. And it's frustrating for me at times. It's a little hard at times. And I speak with a lot of passion because this is truth. And there's nobody incentivizing me other than my mother up there, who gives me the strength, and all the people that I know that are up there and right here with me, around me. And what I want people to know is the 3 words that I use: educate, embrace, and empower. Get educated, embrace yourself into different options, because you can be empowered and there's a better quality of life versus just pharmaceutical drugs. I'm not saying that there's not a role for them. It's just that, should it just be the first line option? And I believe cannabis is not for everybody, yet it should be a first line option and not the last resort.
Or not available at all. I expressed this earlier, where I'm seeing this a lot where I'm at in Utah, where patients are being threatened to be cut off of their pain meds if they test positive for using cannabis.
So let's talk about that. When I first started writing recommendations, the pain clinics would hang up their phone on me. I call them up and say, hello, you've just discharged you've kicked them out of your clinic because they tested positive for THC. And they click. Now, those pain clinics refer those patients to me. So it's going to take a little time, because I didn't write those prescriptions for opioids.
Right.
Those clinics and those other people did. And you can't just cut somebody off. You will have withdrawal, and that can be deadly. And that's another thing. If you stop using cannabis abruptly, you're not going to die from it. If you abruptly stop using alcohol or some of these drugs, you can die from it. There's a possibility. So this is where, again, safety first, do no harm. And the problem is cannabis is in Schedule 1 today. And that's part of why I'm fighting for legalization, because it should be removed off all schedules. It does not belong on any schedule. Loud and clear, I say that. Deschedule, not reschedule. A big difference. Deschedule. Get it off all the schedules.
I absolutely agree. Somebody just said, you're a pretty chill doctor.
I'm very blessed. I have a purpose. And I'm proud, like I said, of what I'm doing. And I did not feel that way. I'm in Massachusetts, the Mecca of education. They've called me names. I'm a zealot. I'm too passionate about this. But I'm like, look, here's the science.
Yeah.
Here's the science. And here's the research. And here's the facts. And I keep just at least start with the 3 facts that we want the world to know. And you can go to things like pubmed.gov. There's research articles. Google Scholars has articles. These are all places. Medscape. All of these places are wonderful information.
Did you say
PubMed? PubMed.gov.
I'm just going to share that for everybody. I love these resources. Like I said, I would love to share them. I'll put them on my profile as well, or on our channel, so everybody can have access to them. And just kind of know where, because like you said, it's a matter of where to find the research, right? Dr. Emma, talk to me really quick. We've talked about those that haven't been using cannabis or maybe new patients, but what advice do you have for cannabis consumers or those that have been consumers for a long time, right? And now are coming into the legal market. You know, what does that transition look like, and what advice do you have? And just
So
a real
first
quick,
thing I try to explain to people is, especially with drugs that people are on, I use the word dose when it comes to pharmaceutical drugs, and I use the word titrate when we talk using cannabis. And Dr. Uma has 3 rules. Rule number 1, you must hydrate before you medicate, because cannabis is a dehydrant. So people don't understand that if you don't hydrate, it's a setup for failure, because most people are dehydrated to begin with. Rule number 2, you got to make sure that you have food on board, because if you don't have food on board and your blood sugar drops, and if people haven't eaten, you know how you get a little shaky, that's another thing that we want to avoid. And rule number 3, which is the most important rule, is write it down, journal. So the 3 words we use is hydrate, food, and journal. And the rules are titrate, a little bit at a time, 1 puff, 1 drop, 1 little part of an edible. Don't eat the whole thing. Low and slow, or very low and slow. But remember these 3 rules so that you can understand where your starting point is, and you'll understand why the journaling is important and reading the labels, because you can get Blue Dream or whatever headband or whatever the name of the cultivar is, but the profile is not going to be the same. So this is where, if you look at the same cultivar grown in California or Massachusetts or somewhere else, it's different because of the air, the water, and the soil. And that's the other parts that I bring about as far as knowing where your cannabis came from. Because if the air is contaminated, the soil is contaminated, or the water is contaminated, you've just taken my plant that didn't kill anybody and you've created a poison out of it. So this is why my background in heavy metals and understanding the value of laboratory testing, and why that is one of the pillars that I have for a global consideration to address.
I think that's something that has to be coming. Someone asked me yesterday on an interview, what would regulations do for the industry? And I spoke specifically to the lab, and only the oversight on the lab and what impact it would have on the industry. It's, in general. Can you speak a little bit to the lack of regulation or the lack of those standards in the lab?
So this is where I neighbor Maine. Okay, Maine does not require you to have laboratory testing. Okay, many of the growers will do their own testing, and this is where the product then becomes cheaper for the customer. So this is where regulations impact the person that's growing it, regulations impact the consumer and the customer. So this is where I keep talking about consumer and customers when it comes to cannabis, because you got to look at all aspects of it. And that's why I keep going back to safety first, do no harm. And that's why regulations help to get these things done, but they also have to look at the entire picture. In cannabis, we don't need to recreate the wheel, folks. Learn from what we've done. Take the good out of it and say, what can we tweak to move forward? So that's where, if a company, a dispensary gets fined once, is one too many times, for a chemical they found, what about all the other times that they didn't find it in their thing because it wasn't found? They're using it. How the heck did it get there? Who put it there? So that's where the regulations are important, because then we know what is being used in the product. The testings are put in. And then the other part about it is that I'd like to see people be able to do their own. You don't need to go to a doctor's office to weigh yourself. You don't need a glucose monitor now to know what your blood sugar is. So I think it's going to be able to create creativity in how self-testing and some at-home testing products, and people can look. And also maybe people can start growing their own if they like. Take a stab at it,
Yeah, I think it's a matter of understanding what you have to test for, right? If I know what I'm going in and what that baseline is or that standard is, I think from my understanding, that's the missing link, or what's really missing even in that lab piece is that standard.
Well, the standards are coming about. They're looking at cannabinoids, they're looking at terpenes, they're looking even at the different types of the components of residual solvents, the pesticides, the heavy metals, fungi, any toxins that are left in it, visually looking at it. So these are standards that we've used in other things. So now we're learning to adapt these things. And all of these testing things that we've used, we're using some of them, and so we're getting there. I mean, the industry that I came into 10 years ago plus is different, and I'm proud of it. And we're going to continue to grow. And it is a global issue, folks.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's the most exciting part is when we talk about it in the US, like there are other countries that are way ahead of us. And when we talk about climate change and the opportunity that hemp has or the cannabis has to address a lot of these global changes and global concerns, that's much bigger than the medicine alone, right? Or the CBD alone. Can you hear the guys outside mowing my lawns?
So, I've got some noise here in my background here too, but honestly,
sorry.
I really feel that if they could do more growing of this plant is so important, because it could be just planted and it could make the land, the soil. The soil is sacred. People don't realize the soil that we have is so sacred, folks, because if we can regenerate this, we're going to leave behind a legacy for our people to come in the future. And that's what I also think about. What are we going to do for the future of this planet other than leaving it dirty with a bunch of plastic that's floating all over in the ocean? Whole nother conversation. But I really believe, like I said, please remember the 5 P's: people, pets, the planet, for peace, and for profit. If we could stop the drug war and make it accessible, plant the plant, and it will rejuvenate your lives and the whole planet.
Well, it's like I use this as an example all the time, right? Poppies. Anyone can grow poppies. Just because I grow poppies doesn't mean I'm making opioids or heroin, right? Grapes. I can grow grapes anytime. Just because I have grapes doesn't mean it's now wine. Just because I'm growing cannabis doesn't mean I'm making a narcotic, right? It's a hard subject for me on the why not grow it, right? And why is it not
a plant? It's a friggin' weed after all, and it's been in other parts. I come from India, and that's something that Ayurvedic medicine. Cannabis is Ayurvedic medicine. It was a sacred plant then, and it's a sacred plant today. And Ayu means life. Veda means knowledge. It was listed in even so many scriptures as medicine. And this is where I feel like anything can be abused. And we talk about addiction. Addiction and an addict are 2 different things. Anybody can become addicted to things. Anything can be abused. But this plant cannot be overdosed. So that's one thing as far as on a safety profile that we need to look at. I could talk to you for hours, Mandi. I really want to say to you and all your listeners, thank you, because my philosophy is reach 1, teach 10, teach 1, reach 10. As you learn the information, please share it. When I'm with one patient, I can only reach one patient, but as they learn, they're my messengers out there. And today, everybody that's out there, each one of you are my messengers as well, all over the world. Thank you.
I love it. Well, with that being said, this will be recorded and shared on our YouTube channel. For those of you that are listening for it through YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitch, Facebook, thank you very, very much for joining. Let us know when you do drop on. We'd love to connect with you. Dr. Uma, how do people get in touch with you if they have questions or want to schedule an appointment?
Absolutely. We answer for everybody everywhere. Our phone number is 508-444-2324 is our phone number. Maybe you could post it up on the website later.
Yep.
We are Uplifting Health and Wellness. That's the name of our clinic, and that's the name of our website as well, upliftinghealthandwellness.com. Also, you can look us up under Total Healthcare THC, because that's what this is about, .com. And our email is upliftinghealthandwellness@gmail.com.
I love it. Well, thank you very, very much for joining. Like I said, I will share for anybody else that's looking for additional content or looking to connect with Dr. Uma. Please log on to the Hemp Hallway at thehemphallway.com or globalhempassociation.org. We've got an awesome network and a whole bunch of upcoming events. Join us tomorrow. We have another interview at the same time, 10 o'clock. And then again next week, we've got a list of other events coming up. So feel free to join us. Dr. Uma, thank you very much again for logging on. I can't wait to see you again at the upcoming events. And I did see Cree, so shout out to Cree, did email us and get back with us about the next event. So thank you very much. We'll see you all.
All right. God bless everybody. Be well.
Thank you.